Tuesday afternoon. Mark Jefferson Golding, the leader of the opposition, president of the PNP, spoke in the budget debate. Now we can make a link between Golding's presentation, Julian Robinson's presentation, and take that in totality as the outline of the PNP's plan for Jamaica if it forms the next government. First question you have to ask yourself, did you hear a plan for the country if the PNP forms the next government? And after asking yourself that, you need to ask yourself, does the plan sound credible from the PNP based on what Julian Robinson and Mark Golding said? I'm looking at Mark Golding this morning. And the first thing is that, well, unlike many people who are in the YouTube chat, I rather like Mark Golding. I've always done. I was a participant, well, the best interview I've ever been a part of, whether in my career in sport or in hard news current affairs. The best interview I've been a part of, Mark Golding was a part of that. It was myself, Cliff, Mark Golding, and the outstanding Walter Scott, KC. It was an issue of constitutional matters way back when I had just completed my apprenticeship and was, moving. And it was brilliant, and I've had tremendous respect for him from that day. And I think that Golding has something to offer to the politics. So it's important for me to put that on the table. The question I asked myself as I saw him go through his paces on Tuesday, is there a prime minister in him? And that was one of the things I was scrutinizing Golding for. Again, I repeat that I am trained in these matters of assessing speeches and making them. Yeah, I did a lot of that in my university time. And there are tricks and things that people like myself have that would escape a casual observer. Did I see a prime minister in Mark Golding? Yes, I did. I saw someone who, somewhere through the weeds and the morass, there is a prime minister. There isn't a prime minister front and center, but there is a prime minister there, which is a credit to him. I want to look at the speech first from what I believe to be the high point of the speech. And there is no doubt that the high point of the speech was from page 40 in the text, where he starts talking about the NHT, the National Housing Trust. That's when Mark Golding stopped reading and started presenting. That's when he started conversing directly with the Jamaican people. That's when he seemed most at ease. That's when he was almost snapping his fingers as he went into the various elements of the plan for the NHT. That's when he hit his sweet spot. So in that presentation about the NHT, as I've said to you before, I want you to work with me on this and believe in me when I tell you this. How you know if a plan or a proposal has the makings of being a good plan or a good proposal is if it causes you to think. You're thinking about the costing of it. You're thinking about really if it makes sense. You're comparing it to what is existing now, what existed before. You're doing all of that with the plan or the proposal. It has the elements of a good plan. And the NHT element of the presentation was what had my brain worrying, trying to process this. And even as he spoke, that was undoubtedly the sweet spot, because there's a lot there for the different segments that he crafted that element of the speech to appeal to. Some good sounding things. So Mark Golding, in that aspect of the speech, NHT Tana, met the mark significantly. But there are questions about the sweet spot. Because I would have thought that with so much time to prepare to make this pitch to Jamaicans about housing, that the costing would have been there. And I'm sorry, but I can't move beyond the point of you saying 11.4 billion, well, you'll stop taking that out of the NHT. By the way, the finance minister said the same thing when she made her presentation 2 weeks ago. And even you said it without saying it, because you said that in 2017, the government extended for 8 more years this drawdown from the NHT, 8 and 7 and 15, 2025, so it would end now. Even so, even by your comments. So it's not as if you're saying that you're going to do something that the government didn't say it's doing already, but be that as it may. So 11.4 billion, you're going to stop taking that. And you're going to do so many things. You had to, Mr. Golding, bring the numbers to prove how it would work. Because as I said, that part of the speech was exciting, it was intriguing, it was engaging. The plans sound good. But I can't use my reading pen and give you a 10 out of 10 for that section because I don't know the cost. Any government can say, you know what, we're going to write off all of the debts of everybody in the public sector who owes a debt to a public utility. We're going to waive the fees for anybody in the public sector who wants to import an SUV. Of course, that's good, and we'd want that to happen. But how much it going to cost? And that's the most important thing at the end of the day. How much will it cost to do what you say you are doing? And it's not enough to give me, if you speak for 3 hours, captive audience nationally, you're being played on radio, in the cars, in the rum shop, in the newsrooms, everywhere you are for 3 hours, and you can't give me the costing. You leave me to wonder now, so hold on there. You don't think we need a costing? Are you saying to me that, listen, let's do this speech, propose these ideas, don't give them a costing because they don't need it, and they won't mark us hard for not giving them the costing of this centerpiece plan? So that for me was a big disappointment, notwithstanding the fact that the NHT bit was your best bit of the speech. I thought your researchers did well in the part of the speech concerning constitutional reform and how you tied what Edward Seaga, Bruce Golding, and Hugh Shearer said, expressed thoughts, and what their the intent of their perspective was on the CCJ, to say to the party that those 3 men led, that look, well, Hugh Shearer wasn't party leader, he was prime minister, but the party that those 3 men are giants in, to say, look, the people before you, Mr. Holness, they were moving in this way where the Caribbean court is concerned. Why aren't you declaring? So your researchers, I think, did a very good job to succinctly just capture what those 3 men said and put it together for you to make the point. But at the same time, I was saying to myself, so why is it that Mr. Golding is adamant for the Prime Minister to declare what his position is on the CCJ? The opposition have already put on the table what their position is on the CCJ already. And yet at the same time, Mr. Golding laments the fact that we should not go the route of referendum because it was politicized, the process, and something like that shouldn't be politicized. But it does make sense to me because you have already gone out to say that you are pro-CCJ. So if we go to a referendum, people go to a referendum knowing that the PNP wants the CCJ. So if you're a PNP, you're more than likely, based on your reasoning, Mr. Golding, to vote yes to CCJ because that's what your party wants. But at the same time, you're saying, don't politicize this thing. Well, a referendum would politicize this thing. And at the same time, you're saying that Holness should declare where he stands. And that now will give a natural yin and yang, JLP, PNP position, and end up politicizing a referendum. But it's just a question I'm asking. So your researchers did well there and with the NHT. The issue of Portmore showed that your researchers left you short. Because when Juliet Cuthbert, beg your pardon, made the very important intervention to say that, look, how can you say that by virtue of what the JLP is doing with Portmore 15th Parish, they are taking away from Portmore residents the right to directly elect their mayor, because all Portmore residents have that. I live in Portmore, and I don't have that right. Because there are many people who live in Portmore who can't vote directly for the mayor, despite them living in Portmore. But apparently, it was obvious Mr. Golding didn't know because he didn't know how to answer Juliet Cuthbert Flynn, and it threw him off from his line. And that was, you notice, that was the only flashpoint in the presentation yesterday. Usually there are many flashpoints, but there was only one yesterday. It was over Portmore, and Golding didn't handle it properly because he obviously did not know that not everybody resident in Portmore can vote directly for the mayor, even though they can vote for a councillor in Portmore. For the rest of it, as I watched the presentation, Donna, from start to finish, an hour into the presentation, I was waiting for Mr. Golding to settle. But the speech to me came across as a university student hurrying through the presentation of their dissertation because they had somewhere else to go. I know that Mr. Golding is a fast-rate speaker, yeah? But there were some points that he made that you present those points. You don't read them off a paper. The student's loan point would have connected even better if you had spoken to your audience when you got there. But what you did was just read it off the paper and run through. It's as if you felt that the clock is against. The clock wasn't against you, Mr. Golding. You owned the time, didn't you hear? Well, as is a form in Parliament, Ed Bartlett said, Mr. Speaker, I move that the member be allowed to complete his presentation, to be given enough time, so necessary, sufficient enough for him to complete his presentation. So you had all the time. So the presentation, as I said, you know, a university student standing in front of a room of professors and just rattling through the presentation of their dissertation at knots per minute. That for me was, and I watched every single minute of it. Every single minute I watched. So overall, with the absence of key numbers to price, to cost your ideas, Mr. Golding, and for the bulk of the presentation where you were in a race with yourself, there isn't a grade I can give you that you would be satisfied with. And I know you can do better. And the disappointment for me from your presentation, as a man who says he's the Prime Minister in waiting and a man who is the Prime Minister in waiting, if you've spent so much time, this is your 5th budget presentation, you didn't go to the party, usual party events on Sunday. You weren't in Southeast St. Elizabeth for the opening of Norman Scott's office. You were in training. You spent so much time in training, and yet you didn't come and tell us, Jamaica, this is going to cost this. This is going to cost that. I get the money from here to do this. The Porsche initiative, you said, okay, well, we'll take some money from the consolidated fund, and then we'll find a source of funding from the profits of the low-income housing that the HAJ repurpose is going to build. That's not good enough. So you got pats on your back from those on your side yesterday. But I wouldn't pat you on the back, Mr. Golding, because there were so many critical things from the presentation that you did not give us, chief among which is the price of your plans. What will your plans cost the Jamaican taxpayer?